Seguimos el recorrido ahora yendo a Grecia con Ana Karapanagioti, que es doctora arqueóloga, directora general del Museo Arqueológico Nacional Εθνικό de Atenas, a cuyo frente ha establecido importantes colaboraciones internacionales con museos, universidades e institutos de investigación de todo el mundo y ha organizado 2 exposiciones temporales para el 2022, una en el museo y otra en el Museo de Melbourne, en Australia. Actualmente está a cargo del proyecto de ampliación y mejora del museo. Ana Karapanagioti recibió, ¿está bien?, el título de asesora internacional del Museo Nacional de Arte de China en el 2023 y miembro correspondiente del Instituto Arqueológico Alemán. El 29 de junio de este año recibió la condecoración de la Orden del León de Finlandia. Te dejo la palabra.
Okay. So, damas y caballeros, buenos días. I'm deeply honored and emotionally touched for being here in one of the most iconic archaeological museums in Europe after the kind invitation of my colleague, the director Isabel Inquierto. Querido director, what is a museum today? This is a significant question that definitely puzzles those who serve in museum institutions around the world, and I hope that it interests the public as well, while motivating also governments around the world to contemplate on the subject. Furthermore, what is a national museum? In recent years, it has been asked by scholars whether it is time to move beyond the National Museum. Theories of globalization, post-nationalism, and cosmopolitanism and their relevance for national museums in the European context are in the limelight at the moment. Within these thoughts in mind, allow me to unfold my personal thoughts based on my own experience as a Director General of an emblematic museum for the past 3 years. A museum that, in its 150-year-long journey, constantly reborns from its ashes and has been quite recently characterized by the esteemed professor of the National Polytechnic School of Athens, Andreas Kourkoulas, as the museum of all museums. The fascinating stories of the Hellenic National Archaeological Museum began with the decision of a woman, Eleni Tositsa, a famous grand dame of the late 19th century Greece, an immensely rich, timid person who, despite the lack of any formal education, was highly sophisticated and became one of the greatest patrons, or should we say matrons, alongside her husband, of several cultural and educational establishments in the Greek state. Shortly before her death in 1866, she donated the plot of land on which the Hellenic National Archaeological Museum still stands. Her generous offer made possible the completion of a vision, first born shortly after the Greek War of Independence in 1821-1829, and lagged behind for some years until 1889, when our museum opened its gates to the public for the first time. Through this museum, the newly established Greek independent state presented itself as the undisputable heir of the ancient Greek civilization, as it was idealized by the Europeans of the 19th century, and claimed the right to have a prominent place among other museums in the international cultural sphere. It was also one of the first museums of this character in the world. This claim to a well-respected place, internationally descent from the ancient Hellenic civilization, was and still is essential for the national identity of the Greeks, and if I may, it is a claim that haunts us, reaching sometimes strongly opinionated, even nationalist outbursts. Alongside the other great benefaction of Tosica couple, the creation of the seat of the National Polytechnic School, which stands side by side with our museum, Eleni Tosica paved the way for the transformation of a suburban area north of Acropolis Humble district by that time to the neighborhood of Exarchia, one of the top boheme and alternative areas in metropolitan cities across the world, according to the International Polls 2023. The creation of Exarchia led to the further development of Athens, its organization as a municipality, and to the formation of the capital and its further expansion during the 20th century. Starting from late 19th century onwards, NAM, Hellenic National Museum and National Polytechnic School, form an architectural silent dialogue where the so-called Greek miracle is celebrated as an innovative cultural spirit. In this spirit, the ancient Greek anthropocentrism is reborn and humans are put at the epicenter of any philosophical, scientific, or artistic study. The building itself was first designed by the acclaimed a Saxon civil engineer and architect Ernst Schiller, who was the pupil of the Danish Theophilus Hansen. He was responsible for the final steps of the original form of the imposing neoclassical building, on which two successive extensions were added in 1930s and 1950s, since the museum was in dire need of more space. Today, our museum, the largest in Greece, is one of the most emblematic in international scale, with the richest collection of original artworks of the ancient Greek civilization globally. According to our inventories that were updated in December 2023, there are inside this iconic building approximately 500,000 ancient artifacts. A percentage as high as 60% of them can be characterized as fine examples of the human intellect and artistic proneness, in my scientific opinion. A visit to our museum can be an ideal start for delving into the history and artistic achievements of the ancient Greeks, while it can initiate a useful conversation of the extent and the nature of the relations between art and ancient philosophy. The artifacts housed in the galleries of the museum cover the history and the evolution of Greek civilization in the Mediterranean basin for the past 7 millennia. Wandering around them is a charming journey that transcends the modern boundaries of Greece and highlights art treasures of global significance that continue to inspire until this very day the Western civilization and artistic creation. Certainly, it is not a journey to be taken lightly. The museum exhibit halls span for more than 9,000 square meters with 65 galleries for the time being. Roughly 15,000 unique or group objects of outstanding value made out of marble, clay, bronze, gold, and other precious or semi-precious metals are exhibited, coming from Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, Italy, and other areas, offering an overview of the ancient Greek world, its cultural achievements, as well as its contacts along the shores of the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. Most of them are, of course, excavation finds from all four corners of the Greek land, which means that their provenance is beyond any doubt known. Just to read all the exhibit's labels would require 14 whole days. And also, we also have an Egyptian collection. First in Balkan and the fourth wealthiest Egyptian collection in the world. So, every visitor is greeted to the museum by the so-called thinker. This is the item I love, I personally admire the most. A clay, almost life-size statue of a seated man touching his chin with his right hand in a movement of thinking. His gaze, fixed on the horizon, is reflecting his deep thoughts. It is dated to around 4,500 BC. Perhaps he is gazing towards the sky, towards the muses, goddesses of the arts and sciences, hoping for inspiration and guidance, since everything in the ancient world is based on divine origins. The ancient Greeks were restless spirits, keen to learning, daring, and great military men, who turned their attention to the sea from early on and established a great commercial fleet that is still today among the global leaders. They came in contact with faraway places and cultures. They inspired and were inspired as well. The Greek language, a language with a 4,000-year history, one of the few that is still spoken for so many centuries to this day, was the way in which these people communicated with the other world. In this language, consolidated in the 9th century BC, Homer narrated the story of the Trojan War in the Iliad and the adventures of Odysseus during his way back home in the Odyssey. After conquests of Alexander the Great, this language reached beyond the Middle East and until this day constitute the foundation for humanities across the globe. In this language, Pericles delivered his funeral oration, the most famous of its kind from antiquity, a hymn to democracy and love for freedom. In it, as Thucydides, one of the greatest historians and political analysts, wrote it down the basic principles of a democratic government and are listed: independent judiciary, equal rights before the law, participation in decision-making and the government, transparency, and accountability, as well as active citizens. These words constituted the great politician, general, and orator Pericles as the symbol of the 5th century BCE, the so-called golden age of Greek antiquity, when Athens reached the height of its might. This is a theme for discussion concerning the Athenian democracy of the 5th century BC. However, we have to ask ourselves, does the aesthetic pleasure that a museum offers suffice to support a holistic experience for visitors that come from all over the world? How can artifacts of the highest quality stimulate the mind and soul of people from completely different national, cultural, ideological, or religious backgrounds? By contemplating more upon these matters, we realized that the formative material of the museum's permanent exhibition is also stuck into the past. Thus, more questions arose, such as, can we characterize a museum that informs its visitors only through old-fashioned labels available only in Greek and English as democratic or even inclusive? Especially when people that do not know how to read and write or have any kind of learning difficulties or even movement, hearing, or any other disabilities are excluded from the knowledge that the museum provides. In order to address these matters, our museum designed and implemented a holistic program of digital services financed by the European Union, offered for free to all the visitors, both digitally and physically, through the newly established platform ds.namuseumlive.gr. Introduced to the public from January the 1st, 2024 onwards, over 900 selected objects from the permanent exhibition halls are included in 40 thematic cycles and presented in the form of podcasts, to speak in modern terms. These podcasts include short stories about love and infidelity, war and peace, sports and festivals, women and cosmetics, medicine and alternative forms of treatment, the first computers and tablets, democracy and other forms of governments, travels, and the daily strife of humans for survival, justice, transparency, and accountability. Stories as old as humanity itself, yet stories still so up to date that do not substitute, not necessarily interpret any aesthetic experience. They act complementary and autonomously supporting the visiting experience. A category regarding our exhibit's influencers could not be absent, of course, from this program. Works that are influential, important, and famous are now available in your mobile devices. In addition, the museum itself is introduced to the public for the very first time through its history and value as an architectural monument, cultural institution that is ever-changing and evolving through historical events, archaeological discoveries, and personalities that supported it and served it. Our galleries have now installations that provide essential information on the exhibits in the Greek Sign Language available for free to all visitors with hearing difficulties. Furthermore, visitors with vision impairment have now the chance to visit our museum and touch some of the authentic exhibits, marble sculptures, and copies of them in order to immerse themselves into ancient art. Small and discreet signs are to be found all around the museum and all galleries. They offer insights to the subject of each gallery, alongside a small acoustic guide for the content of the gallery, a time indicator counting how much time one has to spend in the selected gallery, as well as directions for which galleries come next and for the important spots of our museum. All the stands and showcases have acquired their own new signs as well. A huge work. We have also developed an e-card application, and this is our highlight. The physical visitors can send their own cards postal to their friends and family, sharing their experiences real time. In this way, every visitor using this app can describe his or her experience when this is still vivid and alive, and not only as a memory. It is also an opportunity for each visitor to create a more personal relationship with the museum. Aiming at increasing our virtual visitors, we have also, as other museums have already done this, an online tour available through our website. Through this, our virtual audience can have a first remote look of our exhibits, learn about them and about the time that he or she needs or wants to spend in an in-person visit. In addition, prospect visitors can thus organize their tour and create their own visiting program by choosing the artifacts they want to see in person. Our museum has now its very own certificate live streaming channel on YouTube, which gives the opportunity for a remote participation in our events. This channel allows us also to develop and realize digitalized educational programs in remote areas of the country and even in the Greek diaspora. These are offered to the Greek-speaking pupils. Last but not the least, we have undertaken the gigantic task of the protection and digitization of the important photographic archive of the museum, an archive that is a valuable resource of information not only to the museum and its exhibits, but also to Greece, Greek archaeological sites, and Athens history from the early 20th century to the late 1950s. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Director, allow me to proceed with the final part of this speech. Back in 2004, shortly after the international success of the Olympic Games at Athens, the Greece of Metapolitevsi, as the era after the military junta is called, an official member of the European Union since 1981, started once more to redefine its national narrative. The past remained the pointer towards the future, and two of the most significant goals for this new era were the expansion of our museum and the foundation of a new Acropolis museum, of which only the second one was materialized. Since 2009, Greece has been represented in the global cultural establishment by a museum of excellent quality regarding both its architectural form and the way that its exhibitions are organized. We are very proud for its success. The second goal remained a dream on paper until 2019. Shortly after the official appointment of Kyriakos Mitsotakis' government in the same year 2019, that vision started at last to become a reality. An international closed competition was strategically selected in which 10 world-renowned architectural offices, firmas, in esteem and experience in similar projects were invited to participate after an official invitation by high public officers. In addition, each one of them was invited to choose a Greek architectural office to cooperate with even before the competition. Despite the fact that this innovative in an international scale process was shielded by all the necessary legal procedure with the necessary ministerial act published in the governmental gazette, the reactions from trade unions, renowned lawyers, international media, and many others involved into a ticking time bomb that threatened to explode in the hands of the government and the museum itself. The cost for this competition was covered by donation given to the state by a non-profit organization, 650,000 euros. The year 2022 was decisive for the development and completion of the international closed competition. A 7-member international committee of wise men was created. You can see the names and identities on the slide. To ensure the integrity of the whole process, no one from our museum knew in advance the proposals of the participants. The latter responded immediately and enthusiastically to the official proposal to participate in the competition for the Museum of all Museums. In October 2023, how time flies, the Minister of Culture announced at a press release that the international architectural competition had been won by the partner firms David Chipperfield Architects Berlin and Tompazis and Associates Architects Athens. A new, fortunately short cycle of introversion had begun. Acting like a fireman, the initiator of the whole process, Professor Andreas Kourkoulas, took on the role of addressing the now few reactions of the scientific community to the already completed architectural competition. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's see quickly some slides for the original architectural idea that won the international contest. The text that I will be reading to you is a choice of my own from the brochure that was given to the public in the day of the awarding of the first prize for the expansion of the Hellenic National Archaeological Museum in the presence of the Greek Prime Minister. Quote starts, "The starting point of the project is the existing building. We aspire to regain and highlight its historic qualities in terms of materiality, symmetry, functional order, color, and light, in order to make it shine once again as a landmark monument. The new presence of the building works as a harmonious amalgam of its historic layers from the 19th century, the 1960s, together with a new layer of architecture. This new layer, as a historically informed interpretation, reflects the building as it was built originally. The extension provides a new setting for the historic landmark building, reordering its urban relations and connections in the neighborhood externally, and the organization of the museum internally." Quote ends. Quote ends. So, I'm very pleased to announce to you that yesterday the Parliament of the Hellenic Republic sanctioned the donation contract signed on April 17, 2024 between the Hellenic Ministry of Culture and National Museum on the one side and the donation couple Spiros and Dorothy Latsis of a donation of 40 million euros. This impressive amount of money given to the state by a private couple, most probably the first of its kind in an international scale, will cover all the expenses for the nearly 50 architectural studies and investigations of architectural and technical nature required by the Greek legislation system to be submitted and approved by the state before the actual construction of the extension. This is a 24 months of intensive work also for our staff, and finger crossed, in January 2027, the construction of the museum's extension will start, estimated to be completed in 2030 at the latest. And with this last words, excuse me, and for an epilogue of my talk, I will return back to the point I've already mentioned at the beginning. So, actually, our biggest challenge, the biggest challenge for us as professionals of our museum is to balance between ethnocentrism and cosmopolitanism in our new museological approach. Thank you very much.